Awesome. Well, my name is Cassandra. Hi everybody. I'm super honored to have been invited to speak here at the AAF CreativeZen event. Evan is someone that I have had the pleasure of connecting with through his passions turned into community opportunities, and super grateful for that connection. But this opportunity is pretty special to me. I know that you mentioned Creative Mornings, and we recently ran into each other, I don't know, a year ago, at a Creative Mornings event. I thrive on inspiration, and if I don't seek it, I'm generally not thriving. So I'm grateful to be part of an event like that and hope to share a little inspiration with you guys today. So in preparation for this, I was thinking about various ways to tell my story as an artist and an educator. I know that as human beings, we have the stories we tell ourselves about who we are that shape the identity we know ourselves as, and then also how we project ourselves in the world. So I wanted to be gracious and honest in how I present my story today for a number of reasons. One, this is being recorded, right? So there's going to be evidence. Another, my mother is here, and I promise you, if I am dishonest in any way, we will discuss it. It will be a topic of discussion because honesty is important and authenticity is important to her too. And given the fact that she's here, I can talk a little bit about how I grew into this version. When I was a child, I had a couple specific career goals in mind. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a teacher. And I wanted to be a lawyer. And I knew that it would be possible, if I applied myself, to be any of those things, to choose any of those paths as a career. And part of the reason I knew that was my mother, who is a professional musician, and she's also established herself as a real master in the world of grants management and functioning nonprofits. And growing up as a single only child of my mostly single mom during my upbringing, I got to see how she navigated her life and kept up with her art. She continued to play. She's a professional clarinetist, but she also would teach music in the home. She taught flute, she taught saxophone occasionally, and then she took up bagpipes. Sometimes I say she's just full of hot air, ha ha ha, but not really, not really. She's just very skilled and curious. And so watching her do that and then, experiment and explore different ways of connecting with audiences, I knew that if I followed what I was curious about, something would happen. I could see it. I could hear it. I couldn't get the sound out of my ears, right? So I started looking for the things that sparked my curiosity. So when I was 4, the ice cream truck would go circling the neighborhood, right? You know what I'm talking about. And I would, of course, be coveting that sweet, delicious, mostly sweet, very sweet, super sugary delight, which maybe I wasn't allowed to have, but I would still covet it. And I would hear the song so frequently as a kid growing up that it's like, what's that song? Oh, there's a piano over there. And I wandered over to the piano, and I figured out how to play the song for the ice cream truck that was going around the neighborhood, following my curiosity. I loved hula hoops as a kid. I thought at the time that the highest level of achievement would be to be able to control a hula hoop rotating around my waist and also one rotating around my neck at the same time. That was the peak. That's what I was training for. I was really training for it. But I was just following my curiosity. And as I got older, I kind of kept that up. Now I can look back and say, oh, this was a very clear journey. I put these pieces together, and in this very obvious trajectory, I have this journey to my goal of being where I am right now. Why wouldn't that be a goal? I'm here. But at the time, I didn't have a goal. I was a kid. I was playing. And I was frequently bored. As an only child, I got bored. So what would I do? I would find something to be curious about, and I would follow it. That's how I got into writing. I started writing poetry. When I was 9, 10 years old, I was writing poems. It's how I got into graphic design. I found myself bored at the house again, and there's this computer there. Let's see what it could do. Oh, somebody's birthday's coming up. Let me make a greeting card for them. How do I do that with what I've got at my disposal? And then that, I gave out that card, and then another card, and then another card. And then, of course, my mom, who's always been an advocate, mentions to one of her friends in the world of nonprofits, oh, my daughter is doing graphic design, and she knows this and that. And this friend, who happens to be the executive director of Palm Beach Photographic Center, says, oh, we're looking for an intern. Maybe your daughter wants to come in. So I'm a teenager, and I'm learning Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator and all of these very high-level programs in the mid-90s. Not too many teenagers can say that. I'm very grateful for having had that experience, but it was only possible because I followed my curiosity. I messed around and found out. And so I kept following my curiosity. Follow my curiosity, see what I find. Follow my curiosity, see what I find. When I got to college, follow my curiosity, see what I find. I found, when I was in the process of applying for college, I had actually qualified for a computer science scholarship. So the graphic design concepts transitioned to web programming pretty early. And I was just following my curiosity to see what I found. But I found I didn't really like programming at all. And pretty quickly I figured out there's nobody that's gonna pay me enough money to just sit on my butt and stare at this computer screen for the rest of my life. Like, that's not gonna work for me. So, following my curiosity, I ended up in history class and became a history major. And history was fascinating to me, endlessly fascinating to me. It's just stories of people's lives. What's more interesting than that, right? So while I was in school, I was also getting exposed to different kinds of art and getting opportunities to practice different kinds of art. College is great for that. There was a female a cappella chorus on campus. Cool. I jumped into that, and I was performing music and singing, which I had always wanted to do when I was growing up, but didn't really have an opportunity to. Rock star, remember? I knew I wanted it. So I got a chance, to sing when I was in college. I was craving more opportunities to do design work, because I would get bored and then maybe I'd get lonely for my, high school life. So I'd wander into the media center at school and just wait for somebody to need help with the scanner. And then I would jump in and be like, oh, what are you doing? We created this campus group called Random Acts of Kindness. And we created a partnership with the on-campus cafe for free, gift certificates to the cafe that, we designed and printed up and laminated, and then we stashed them all over campus so people would find them. So that was one of the random acts of kindness that we were doing. That was a really fun project. And then I was very much involved in dance. And in exploring dance, there's two components of that. There's the social dancing that happened every Friday and Saturday night on campus. They'd have big parties, and somebody would step up to be the designated DJ. They'd put the playlist together, boom, boom, we'd have a party. It was always awesome, and I was always there. Even when the music was bad, it was awesome. There was one night, I remember very clearly, Michael Stipe from REM wandered onto our campus. I don't know the whole backstory of this, but it happened to be one of these party nights, but the music was awful. It was the worst, but I was still there, and I was dancing, and then I look over and I'm like, who's that guy? I make a face at him, and he makes a face back at me, and I go, oh my God, that's Michael Stipe. Why is he here? Why is he here tonight when the music is awful? You know? And then somebody stepped up and changed the playlist, and it was great. And Michael Stipe was wandering around and dancing with everybody. It was that kind of place. And then there was a program at school called Dance Tutorial, where individual students would step up and say, I'm going to take responsibility for a performance at the end of the semester in the campus theater. Who wants to choreograph? Who wants to dance for this performance? So I participated in Dance Tutorial as a dancer, and then a choreographer, and then I ran Dance Tutorial for a couple semesters as well. So I was really into that. The Sarasota Ballet had public classes that were happening on the weekends right off campus, like a building over from our library. So I found out about that through the grapevine, and I started going to modern and jazz and, you know, reliving dance. Something also that I started when I was very young, thanks to Mom, and loved it. And then I found out through the grapevine that there was like a group of renegade dance teachers, one of whom had a key to a studio downtown. And on Sundays, they'd pay a drummer to come and play and run their own class for themselves. And I invited myself to that class. So I got to go. I would bike from campus to downtown Sarasota. I would go to class. I'd get, you know, worked out and inspired and enlivened. And then I'd go have breakfast. And then I'd go to the library and check out a new audio tape for my Walkman and bike home. It was great. College was great. But I was really just following my curiosity to see what I would find. And one night at one of the campus parties, and the music is great, somebody brings out a hula hoop. And I was like, oh my God, is this my moment? When I was 8 years old, I had a dream, and it was to rotate a hula hoop on my neck and on my waist at the same time. And I've gone out of practice, I'm not training, but maybe this is it. But there was only one. So I'm like, okay. Now I had been active at that time in Dance Tutorial, so I was dancing, I was choreographing. Somebody had this hula hoop. They were playing all kinds of silly games with this silly toy. And I just hijacked the toy and wouldn't let anybody else play with it. And I was in my own trip of, you know, movement and discovery and what can it do, what can it do? And after that, I was like, this is it. I am going to be a performer at Mallory Square in Key West with this hula hoop. And I called my friend who's a DJ and I was like, yo, we're gonna work together and you're gonna put together a set, I'm gonna choreograph to it, we're gonna go to Key West and I'm gonna do this thing. And then I didn't do it. I didn't do it for a long, long, long time. And I actually put the hoops away. I left school. It wasn't pretty, but it happened and it was important because what ended up happening as a result of that was I got really bored. And when I got bored, I started looking for something to get curious about. And what I found was this show on HBO called Deaf Poetry Jam. Deaf Poetry Jam, super dope. And I know that at least one of the previous speakers at AAF CreativeZen, Asia Sampson, who is an HBO deaf poet, heralds from the legacy of that project. But I was just, you know, like watching HBO on my couch. And there was a Palestinian-American poet who was performing, Suhair Hamad, and she looked right into the camera and she said, affirm life. And then she repeated it, affirm life. And I was like, that's it, I gotta do that. Whatever that's happening there, I'm doing that now. So I started going back to my writing and putting things together in a way that it would make sense to perform it. And then I went back to school. And there was a poetry performance class that was being run by other students that I had worked with because my graphic design projects had led to creating an on-campus literary magazine before I had left. And so I said, hey, so-and-so, get me in this class. Like, I didn't find out about it until we were already halfway through the semester. But I was like, get me into this class. And he's like, all right, well, you can join the class, but we're having a slam, which is a competition. We're having a poetry slam. And the poetry slam is actually like next week. And our class isn't meeting again for a couple of weeks. So if you want to be in the class, you have to come compete at this poetry slam. And I was like, okay. So I did. And I won. And then I was like, oh, okay. This is real. I'm doing this. And then I left school again. And when I came back to Palm Beach County, which is where I'm based, it's where I went to high school and it's where I'm based now, I found out that there were other poetry slams around. And I started going to them. And then I started competing at them. And then I started winning at them. And within a couple of months, I was on a team to go to the National Poetry Slam. This is 2003, it was in Chicago. And I was pretty terrified because it was my first opportunity to really, really compete. Listen, poets think that they are very tough competitors. And I would say there are a number of them who are. A slam is a competition. Yes, it's about art, but it's a competition and people take that very seriously. They also take partying very seriously. So I was, surrounded by these hard partying poets who were really serious about this competition. It was a little nerve-wracking, to say the least. But I had a great time, and I decided I really wanted to pursue this. So I took over I got passed the torch of running the Poetry Slam in Delray Beach at Dada, which is a restaurant and bar that supports the arts, is named after an art movement. That was at the end of 2003. And I ran the Poetry Slam at Dada until 2008. Then I took a break, and then they called me back in. I had tried to find other people to take it over. That didn't quite work out, so a couple of years later I stepped back in. I ended up running the slam for a total of 7 years, every Tuesday night. It was a lot. But I gotta tell you, one of my favorite memories of this time, the slam was a late night thing, and it was on a Tuesday night. Who is up at, late on a Tuesday night? Really, it was a gimmick for the restaurant to bring in a crowd on a Tuesday night. That's a light night for a late night crowd. So they would have this event. It wouldn't start until 10:30 at night. We would end around 1 or 1:30 in the morning. I'd be driving home around 2 a.m. At 2:15 on WLRN, there would be this break in the programming, which at the time was the overnight reggae cruise with, what was his name? This is so important. Rich Davis, the man inside your radio. And he would give News of the Caribbean at 2:15. And then at 2:22 or 2:25, depending on how long the News of the Caribbean segment went, he would start the morning roll call. He would shout out all the industries that were up and working at that time. All the prep cooks in the kitchen, prepping for the day. Big ups to you, good morning. Good morning to our teachers and students up late studying hard. Good morning to our brothers and sisters in the arts fraternities, good morning. And he would say all these good mornings to our dispatchers and our ambulance drivers, good morning to you. And then he would say, today is, and I guess today's Friday, right? So we'll just say Friday. Today is Friday, August 12th. It is another day, another opportunity. How will you use the opportunity afforded to you today? And if you are celebrating a birthday or special milestone, we will celebrate with you. And for the rest of us, let us celebrate life in its glory each and every day. And just remember, someday your ship will come in, so don't be at the airport. You've got to be at the dock, and you've got to be early. And then he put the reggae music back on. Every Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night. It was great. Unfortunately, he has passed away. But the memory of those moments and the joy of that appreciation, to be up late but working, to be up early but working, and then to hear that you're appreciated, that you're remembered, that made an impact on me. And it also reminded me of opportunities that I had as a kid to experience joy in service. And this is something I absolutely have to thank my mom and my dad for in different ways. My dad was a total pushover, I'm a daddy's girl, and I would say, I'm gonna go to Chuck E. Cheese, and of course, we would go. And of course, I would be obsessed with, accumulating all these tickets in skee ball to go and get the stupid prizes. At sometime around age 8 or 9, I was like, all these prizes are junk. I don't want any of these things. My dad was like, well, why don't you give your tickets away? I was like, what? You know, of course, at first that's like, how dare you? I worked for these, you know? Then I was like, I mean, I guess I could. So I started like ripping off, you know, like 3 tickets, 10 tickets, 15 tickets. And I'd run up to unsuspecting kids and be like, here. And some of them would be like, okay, thanks. And some of them would be like, ah, you know, and they'd run them off. But it was so much fun to give things away. And then my mom modeled this a number of different times in my life. We picked up some rain-slogged foreigners from Poland, right? Do you remember this? We were on our way to a party, and we are driving up the street, and we see this couple. It's late at night. They're at a bus stop, and it's pouring rain. They have nothing, you know? And my mom pulls over and says, like, you know, where are you going? And they're like, we're trying to go to Wellington. She's like, where are you from? And I think they said Poland, right? And my mom like looks at me and then looks at them and says, want to go to a party? So we took them to this party we were going to, and then they all thought they were my mom's parents at this party, and you know, they were adorable. But then we took them home, you know, and I gave them some information about the bus schedule in Palm Beach County, which I knew very well at the time. And then there was this other occasion. I remember I was 16 years old. We were visiting family friends in Atlanta, and it's 6 in the morning, and my mother is like shaking me awake, and I'm not a morning person. Even this is a stretch for me, but especially when I was 16, like that was a no-go. But she's shaking me awake, and I'm like, what? She goes, you want to go volunteer at the Peachtree Road Race? And I was like, okay. And we did it. It was so much fun. It was so much fun. We were blocking traffic. We're handing out water to the racers. You know, it was a blast. So I learned about how much fun could be had. And I'm in the world of Poetry Slam, and I'm doing the best I can in that world. But I'm starting to notice that there are elements of that life that don't really jive with what I want for myself. The long, hard partying nights in a bar, lots of cigarette smoke. I don't want any of that. I don't drink. So, and I stopped drinking when I was in my early 20s. It's not a thing for me. I was noticing that, you know, they just weren't taking care of their bodies, and I wanted to be in a community of people that took care of their bodies. And then I'm driving by a park on Earth Day, and I see this woman in the middle of the park. They're having a celebration for Earth Day, and she's got this giant hula hoop, and she's swinging it all around above her, and then outside of her, and then she jumps through it, and then it's back on her waist, and then she takes it from her waist, and she lifts it up again, and I was like, holy cow, that's it. I park illegally, I run onto the park, you know, I run immediately to her, and I was like, I need one of those. How much is it? You have to show me everything you know right now. And you know, wow, curiosity, discovery, this is cool. And it was through my practice from that point on with hoops and hoop dance that I discovered this thing called the flow state. So that amazing positive psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, almost a completely unpronounceable name, but who wrote the book on flow, and then a bunch of other books on flow and creativity. And I actually prefer some of his other works to the one book on flow that everybody knows. But he had done so much research to uncover the secrets of the feeling of being in the zone. So the flow state, which I was finding through my own personal hoop dance practice, which I also remembered when I was learning graphic design, when I was writing a poem and really in love with it, sometimes when I was on stage performing and every single note was the right note at the right time and time disappeared and I was so engaged in the moment, that space, that was actually what I had been chasing all this time. Nothing feels as good as that. And it's free, and it doesn't involve any outside substance of any kind. Wow, what is this? And how can I support other people in having this experience? So, hula hoops. Yeah, I kept practicing. I found out that there was going to be a teacher training in Florida. I went there, you know, because I had a friend who was like, oh, you have to teach, you have to do classes in this. You have to teach me. And I was like, I'm a teacher. At that time, I was actually, I had gotten my professional certification in teaching. I was teaching high school social studies at a charter school for the arts in West Palm Beach called G-Star, and loved teaching. Sometimes I would find myself in a state of flow when teaching too. That's super cool. You know, I was like, I don't know how to teach this. I know how to teach history. I don't know how to teach this. So I signed up for this teacher training, and I walk into a room, and of course, here I am thinking like I'm the only one doing this. The year was 2008. I walk into this room, and now I'm surrounded by like 12 other Floridians who are also completely in love with their own hoop dance practice and looking to find out how they can teach others. And I was like, oh, this is a whole thing. And then I started finding out about other people who were experimenting and playing and dancing and moving with other kinds of props. So in addition to hula hoops, there's poi, which is balls on strings. There's juggling. There's fans. There's contact staff, which is actually a movement form that emerged from martial arts and using the bow staff in martial arts. All of these different toys that people were playing with as adults, grown adults, playing with toys out in the open on a regular basis, and chasing the flow state, you know, because it does feel so good and it's not a secret. And in finding these other people that were doing this thing, I was like, wow, this is so great. There's workshops and festivals and oh my God. So I started going to some of these other events. I actually, in 2008, I left teaching. I thought I wanted to start a school. So I had created a research trip for myself around North America, visiting educational alternatives, like really out there stuff, free schools, unschooling centers, schools that emphasize critical pedagogy or social justice, that kind of thing. That's what I was looking for, and I was visiting these projects, and when I would visit, I would say, listen, while I'm here, I can offer a class in making hula hoops and hoop dancing. I can offer a class in graphic design. I can offer, you know, a class in writing and performance. If there's anything that you feel like your kids would benefit from and that they would like, I would be happy to offer that. So a number of these schools took me up on the hula hoop making and hoop dance workshops. So while I was traveling, I was also teaching people how to do this. I was also visiting conferences and festivals and events that taught hoop dance technique at higher level than maybe I had at the time, but it's something to keep reaching for, which is important in the flow state. And you know, when you're seeking this state, you're almost trapped in a cycle of having to constantly elevate your level of practice and elevate your level of skill in order to get to that sweet spot where time and space disappears. If you stay at the same level of practice, you'll hit it a couple of times, but it becomes a lot less powerful. It starts to get diluted. So you gotta keep growing. And so I was looking for new techniques, things that I wasn't finding in my own personal practice, and I was thinking I would start a school. At some point in this journey, I went to the Alternative Education Resource Organization annual conference in upstate New York at that time. This is 2008. And their keynote speaker was a guy named Matt Hearn. He was a University of British Columbia urban studies professor who had written this book and helped establish an unschooling center that was run by youth in Vancouver, in the East Commercial Drive area of Vancouver, called the Purple Thistle Center. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was super dope. It was also right around the corner from Casa de Gelato, which has 218 flavors of gelato. Just in case you ever end up in Vancouver, you need to look up this place, okay? Casa de Gelato. So this speaker, Matt Hurd, gave this really inspiring talk, but one of the things that he said was, even the best schools are just warehouses for youth that keep them separate from being active stakeholders in their own communities. And I couldn't get that thought, that quote, I couldn't get it out of my head. Why do I want to create another one of those? There are lots of people making those. And there's lots of them that exist. They don't need another one. And I don't need to be putting all of my time and energy into that. Now, I had followed my curiosity there, but it was kind of a dead end. And at the same time, I was still studying hoop dance and finding joy in the flow state, and chasing the flow state, and then connecting with others who were doing the same thing. So I thought I wanted to start a school, but I ended up starting a festival. And I had some experience in working behind the scenes in festivals throughout my adolescence and early adulthood. Palm Beach Photographic Center had an annual photography festival called Photo Fusion. I believe they still do. And one of my favorite things about being on staff during Photo Fusion was laminating the posters that went all up around the city to advertise the different workshops, and then making sure that the computer lab was functioning, that the network was up. That was my nerdy task as a teenager. And then when it was pretty obvious that I couldn't sneak into Sunfest anymore as an under 12, thank you, female body, I signed up to volunteer and was volunteering in Central Inventory. All the booze and all the screws for Sunfest come from Central Inventory. And that was an amazing experience. It's the only volunteer duty that's inside central operations for that massive music and art festival that happens up in Palm Beach County. So I did that for 5 years. I got to learn so much about festival operations. For the National Poetry Slam, I started as a competitor. Then I became a coach. Then I became an MC for the competitive bouts. And then I became the volunteer coordinator for Poetry Slam Incorporated. And I was running volunteers in a city I had never visited before for 5 days, 3 times a year for their annual poetry festivals, the National Poetry Slam, the International Individual World Poetry Slam, that's what it was called, and the Women of the World Poetry Slam. So I would show up in the city on like a Tuesday, figure out how I'm gonna get around and do everything that I'm gonna need to do, hold 2 volunteer orientations with hundreds of people, and then make sure that everything was functioning for the rest of the event. Those events are completely volunteer run. So I learned a lot. And I took all of this, all this background and all these skills that I had been accumulating. I could design my own website. I could design whatever posters or advertising or marketing, materials I would need. I had experience in instruction as an educator and then also as a hoop dance teacher. So I could talk to people who were doing this stuff about how to teach it to others, and try to figure out if somebody was going to be a good instructor or not. I could design a program for a festival, put all the pieces together, right? Handle the logistics. What's required for insurance? What's required for permitting? All of those things. Some of them I had seen because of my behind the scenes work in festivals and events. Some of them I had no idea about, and I made a bunch of mistakes. And that's okay too. But I was able to put together, with a lot of help from a lot of people, the very first Florida Flow Fest in 2011, which drew movement artists from around the state to South Florida. We held it in Lake Worth Beach at Bryant Park there. It's a big, beautiful park. And I brought in instructors from across the US to come and teach us in Florida. Because I was tired of traveling to these other things and thinking, I'm learning so much, I can't bring this experience back to my community. So I'm gonna bring them a festival. And out of all of the art forms that I have worked in, that I have practiced, sampled, enjoyed. Festival production, it is the best. It's better than performing the most engaging, inspiring, hilarious, poignant poem you've ever heard in your life in front of an audience of 5,000 people. Better than that. It's better than flawlessly executing a piece of choreography that's so complicated you spent 2 years mastering it. Better than that. Running a festival, it's the best. So I have like two metaphors. One metaphor about running the festival, and then one is more like a series of things I tell myself when I'm getting ready for this thing. The metaphor that I use is when I'm running a festival, I'm a cosmic DJ. So on one deck, a DJ is gonna have usually two, sometimes more, players, right? They're gonna have A and B. So on deck A, I've got all of the tangible elements. I've got the permits and the insurance and the tents and the tables and the instructors and their flight schedules and like all the practical things, right? On this deck over here. And then on this deck, I have all of the intangibles, the things that couldn't be predicted or planned for. I have the energy and excitement of the guests. I have their state of mind and their mood and their emotion, and then that of the instructors. I have the weather. I have, the vibe of the city officials who are gonna come and survey and make sure that I'm doing what I said I would do. All of those intangibles over here. All of the tangibles over here. And I'm just flipping back and forth between those decks. That's what it feels like to be producing a festival, and it's the best. So what I tell myself, for the first couple of years when I was doing this, we started in 2011, was the first Florida Flow Fest. I ran the festival for 3 days. It was a 3-day festival in 2011, 12, 13, 14, and 15 in Lake Worth. In 2015, I decided to bring it to other communities. I had started to get messages through social media. Oh, I wish there was something like this by me. I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. So I brought it to Austin, Texas, and Asheville, North Carolina in 2015. In 2016, we also brought it to Seattle, Washington. But by 2016, I had learned my lesson. And all of the Flow Fests were 2-day events instead of 3-day events. Listen, it takes a lot of energy to run a festival, and especially one like this. These festivals are all free to the public to attend. That was the point from day one for a couple of reasons. I'm not doing all this work just so a limited, privileged group of people who could afford it can experience it. I'm not gonna do that. That's not interesting to me. There's no joy in that for me. Fences and gates are expensive. I don't know if you've ever had to install a fence anywhere. I don't wanna pay for that. I don't wanna pay for that. I'd rather that money go to the artists. If I have to choose, and I get to choose because I'm the one in charge, I'm not gonna pay for a fence when I could add to the income of a working artist, right? What would be the point? So because they were all free events, it's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of extra work, a lot of extra security goes into that, a lot of extra cost goes into that security, depending on the city, depending on their permitting structure and their rules and regulations. So I had learned my lesson. 2 days. We could do all of this in 2 days. Who's gonna come to an event on a Friday anyway? They gotta work. We'll do this in 2 days. So 2016, 2-day events in South Florida, in Austin, Texas, in Asheville, North Carolina, and Seattle, Washington. In 2017, Chicago, Illinois, and Austin, Texas, and Seattle, and South Florida. I wasn't doing Asheville anymore. I'm not doing that festival for the foreseeable future. Asheville is beautiful, and everybody should go there and enjoy biscuits and beer, and it's a great town. But what I had been learning through my curiosity, following my curiosity, was it's actually much easier to do an event like this in a big city. Logistically, it's easier. If I'm flying artists in to an international airport, that flight's going to be cheaper than it is to a regional airport. Okay? The transportation from the airport to the venue or to wherever they're staying is going to be easier to negotiate and might be very cheap. It might even be public transportation. Like in the city of Chicago, I try to fly my people into Midway, where you can hop on the red line and be right in the city, okay? As opposed to O'Hare, which is also an international airport, but it's a lot harder to get there, you know? Things like that. So because I had learned this lesson, I wasn't gonna continue with the Asheville Festival. The closest international airport to Asheville is 2 hours away, it's Charlotte. It's just unnecessary. It was unnecessary for my artists, and it was also kind of unnecessary for me. Unnecessary roughness. How can we make this a little easier? Switching from 3-day events to 2-day events. How can we make this a little easier for everybody, myself included? So I learned that lesson. But the whole time that I was doing these events, I was still trying new things because, you know, I would get bored and then I would get curious and what can I add? I started bringing in international instructors. What's that process like? I learned about that. The very first couple of years that I was doing it, I would plan a terrifying experience before each festival. So the first Florida Flow Fest, before I ran my very first festival, I went skydiving. I wouldn't have gone skydiving if I didn't have this group of friends that was like, we're going skydiving, do you want to come? It wasn't something that I would choose necessarily from a list, like, oh, I'll take the skydiving today. No, that's not, I'm 5 foot tall. Why would I go skydiving? I've lived my entire life within 5 feet of the ground. That doesn't make any sense. But I did it, and it scared me, and it was awesome, and it made running the festival a lot easier because I had just done this thing that, you know, terrified me. 1 year, I hadn't specifically scheduled an activity, and the fest was coming, and I found myself in a meeting with this trapeze company. I was trying to create a partnership where our people could come and take lessons on the flying trapeze as part of the festival. I was like, great, everything's going great. I get up to leave the meeting, and the guy says, oh, it's a good thing you're wearing pants, you gotta go fly. And I said, what? And he said, we won't do business with anyone who doesn't go on the flying trapeze. And so this is like 4 days before the festival. It's in the middle of a weekday. I'm at 10 in the morning. I'm climbing this ladder, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, my people are so lucky that I care about them, that I'm gonna do this thing. They better be grateful, you know, and this tiny man is holding on to this, you know, tag on my belt like a spider monkey at the top of the platform, and terrifying, exhilarating, glad I did it. By the time I got to running multiple festivals in multiple cities, I didn't need anything else to terrify me. I'm good. So where we are right now with Flow Fests, 2019 was our biggest year of fests. In that year, I like to use my hand as a map of the United States. In that year, we held a festival in Florida, a festival in San Diego, a festival in Texas, a festival in Chicago, and a festival in Seattle. The Seattle festival is called Northwest Flow Fest. This year, that festival was gifted by me to the Seattle Flow Arts Collective, which is a local nonprofit there in Seattle, to produce from here on out. We co-produced the event this year, and so, you know, we're gonna still stay in touch because they're gonna be continuing the Flow Fests brand, but they're gonna run it better than I ever could because I don't live in Seattle, you know? So I'm really excited about that, and of course in 2020 was a big challenge, but I learned, because I was curious about this whole new world of orchestrating online events, virtual events, and I used a platform called Crowdcast to run my event, and I was able to run 2-day festivals, virtual festivals, 4 of them over the course of the year 2020 by myself in my house with my internet connection. You know, thank goodness I had some acuity and skill in the areas, technologically speaking, that I would need in order to pull something like that off. So I'm grateful that my curiosity all this time has led me into collecting the skills that I need to be able to support my community in being its best. And my hope is that in the future, we continue to grow and inspire even more people to take up play as a regular component of their lives for all of the benefits that it provides. So with that, thank you for coming along with me on this journey and following my curiosity with me. And I look forward to connecting with you further and becoming curious about what you are creating and seeing where that takes me to.